Ribro Banda Lebo Shanda kuwira mutswanda napali muzika sisu tusiko ndini wacho.
3 Mob Radio presents
Ashaka woma kugadzira dola kuva 15 cents. Ashaka woma trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents.
Musekiwa.
Larry, how you doing?
Yeah, I've been getting the calls.
Yeah? It's been happening.
The churches.
Serious?
Yeah, Papa's kids.
They're crazy.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into the writing, because the writing is the most, I think, was the most critical part of this. I remember us having a call with Aura and Kevin and Nancy, and we spent hours talking about, it was a couple of times, twice, we talked about how the characters needed to be, I think, in terms of Adam.
Yeah.
Needed to be less comical and more believable.
Yeah.
But I think you writing the first episode made it a lot more palpable for me. Like, get me through that process, because I needed you to give me that first episode that actually gave me the impetus to write everything else.
I think what was interesting about it is, again, as you're saying, finding the right balance, between creating a serious character with emotional elements, with the right emotional elements and balances. So I remember doing the first draft and sort of, initially being confident about it, and then realizing, having them presented it to the team, that actually this character needed some grounding. But in finding that grounding, also creating the right ingredients around him to tell a story, to present the topics and the issues that we were confronting, but also bring a bit of humor in it as well, a bit of wit around it. And being a church guy, it was good to do that, to actually bring to fore some of the things that are humorous about prophets and stuff, at the same time maintain the seriousness of the topic.
Before you wrote the series, I was going through my head like, what am I going to call this series? The tongues thing. Where did you get it from?
So it was when I was writing it, and I realized, I think what was interesting is listening to him as he's evolving as a character, and then I realized this guy's got a weird set of tongues, and so I started writing it, and then at some point I don't know if I should share the best kept secret that some of it is actually a language. Some of it is Finnish actually. So I sort of thought, it would be interesting to add, funny lingo. So Ribro Banda was just like, Wawira Mtwanda was like, so it was nice to just mix up a few languages, some fake stuff, like 2 languages, a bit of the showrunner, and some foreign language that no one knows. And so I thought, this is kind of cool,
I think what I've enjoyed about the process in these is how we sort of had so many ideas about where this story could go, and how because as they evolved, especially after the actors got it into it, you're like, okay, this character can have a little bit more, can get a little bit this way. We thought the character would go that way, but actually let the character go and do what the character's going to do, even if you don't think you would do the same thing. Also, keeping in mind that writing for performance is different from writing for people reading, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Especially radio. What I find fascinating about radio is versus film or theater, is you don't have the liberty of setting a stage, of setting, or even creating the set, where you sort of have an idea of what you're expecting, or what you're anticipating visually. With radio, you have to trust. You sort of have to create a world that, is believable, but no one can see it. And so it's almost like painting a picture for someone that they, I want to avoid saying painting a picture that they can't see. It's almost like a paradox. It's like painting a picture they have to create in their minds. So you're just painting this picture that they can't see, but they have to create it in their mind. They have to imagine they're in that world.
what I've enjoyed in this is having to create the kind of tools and being involved in the kind of tools that allow for Kevin to bring this to life. And I think as an important part of him is like, okay, I need this, I need that. What does the character do that? Having that creative process with him, and has been also having to become more aggressive in your writing at the same time as being making sure it's believable, making sure that there's a lesson. Because when I was thinking of this series, I thought of Breaking Bad. No one thinks they're the bad guy in the story. So Adam never at any point thinks he is wrong. Even if you're looking at his decisions, but and you're not going to make the same decision, but he never believes he's wrong.
And that's the thing I found it interesting with when you started working through the relationship, you know, like with Tatenda, how as you're reading, you're thinking something's wrong here, you know, something's totally wrong. But for Adam, you know, and I think for you, I would be curious, you know, I think that was something that struck me when I read that script, just sort of noticing how this relationship has evolved, but Adam's dealing with it as though there's nothing wrong, you know, there's no issue whatsoever. So almost like, how did you get there, you know?
Well, I watched a lot of prophet videos. So you can see that there was one prophet, I can't remember him, and you say that, you know what, whatever you contribute to the church is not enough to get anything that you want to get, so therefore it's a seed. That's number one. So it's the arrogance. They believe everything. It's sort of narcissism that this guy has. He believes that everything revolves around his lifestyle. Because I just kind of felt like I needed him to be a 3D kind of character. Somebody who believes he's best, but he's also got his moments of weakness. And I think in Michael Kudakwashe bringing that out a lot more. You can see the tone in his voice. There's the part in the poverty. He has this thing like everything has to happen according to his settings. So obviously he's just going to think, well, this girl is just one of the usual devices that happen in my life, and I'm going to use her as I please, just as much as I use the church. And so I was like, another aspect of it is when I looked at Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky situation. Bill Clinton lived his life normally as the president of the United States, in spite of the fact that her life had been
totally
turned upside down. So I sort of kind of see powerful men as being narcissistic, and everybody else has to reconfigure themselves
to align to whatever. And I mean, there's that infallibility to it where it's the tendency to feel invincible or to present yourself as an invincible, yet deep down you're human, you know. And it makes me think of 300, Xerxes, and how Leonidas says, I want to see a god man, or a man who thinks of himself as a god, bleed. And that's all he wants. His objective is not to kill him, but just to see some blood, just to let him know or remind him of his humanity. And I think that's what I found interesting within this story as well. Just how, and I remember saying to you, it's a very topical thing within the churches, you know, and some people say it's good, some people say it's bad, some people agree with it, some people, you know, have issues, and others it's so controversial, yet deep down it's trying to find the humanity. Is this person still human and fallible and exposed to weaknesses as we all are, or are they perfect, you know? And I think that's why I found that interesting, the manifestation of the pure Adam, as in this guy has this sense of, you know, I'm more than human, I'm a higher level of human to everybody else. Whereas when it comes down to the nuts and bolts,
I also found it very interesting. I saw it in his name, Adam, because he's the first man.
And that claim to fame.
And also, I think importantly in the story for me was how we were going to, and I think that was always my story in terms of trying to function, how it would write and so forth. That's why I had a lot of the back and forth, is to make sure that he was not just accessible to Zimbabweans. This guy is a person who is scalable across experiences. And while it tells fundamentally Zimbabwean story in the context of 2014 Zimbabwe in a five episode series, which is a limited series, I think key aspect of it was to say, if somebody in the United States who's an American, someone who's from France, who's French, never been to Zimbabwe, can they see themselves in a character who has those tendencies, using Zimbabwe as a storytelling device, using the issues that are there in Zimbabwe and across the world, abuse of power, corruption and all that other stuff. So it's just molding that character into a person who quite literally, I mean, I wouldn't hang out with him, but I've enjoyed hanging out with him.
I mean, it's been interesting in that, it's uncovering, and what was interesting is having conversations with some of my friends, and they're like, yeah, dude, you stirred a hornet's nest. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, the people who actually believe, and this is within church circles, or a friend of mine, also Christian, says, the people who actually believe guys like that, we know the difference, but someone else actually believes and will fall for, it's almost like guys who set up cults, it's a similar kind of scenario. And you're in a position of power and you present yourself charismatically, and you can diverge and go off on a tangent, doctrinally, spiritually, and no one actually cares. They just believe you as a person.
But what is critical for me is, I think I needed at some point other characters like Tatenda and Tawu to have independent stories that evolved on their own, that they are their own agencies. So very important to have their own agency. So I wanted, for example, Tatenda not to just be some silly little girl. But Hilda to not just be some church assistant. Tawu not to just be some random guy. So they needed to be as much a part of the story as he was, and as much as he started off the central character. As the story develops, these start having the ages. So this stops becoming the story of Adam and more the story of, oh goodness, what is happening in society.
And I found that interesting as we were developing, how I found Hilda very interesting, and it took a conversation we had to sort of realize her potency and her agency. I think it was episode 4 or something. We're working through it and we're having a conversation, and I focused on Tao. And then when I went back to re-edit, and I sort of then thought, wait a minute, Hilda in episode 3 has some hints of doubt. What if deep down, the two layers, and that's the layering of your supporting characters, is they suddenly become three-dimensional. They're not just there to fulfill a role, but actually to live out their inhibitions, their own experiences, and what they go through,
And I think also, speaking of that, like when I look at sometimes you look at church people and so forth as a homogenous group. Everybody has faith. Everybody believes. Everybody has no moment of doubt. Everybody absolutely thinks that they're good, or everybody thinks everybody else is bad. But everyone has their own individual struggle.
Yes. And once you uncover that, what makes any story genuine or captures some sort of level of truth is, you're not going to get everything right. You're not going to be perfect. You're less likely to be. And in that, I think we uncover some sort of humanity that and often church is viewed as the place to be perfect or to present yourself as perfect, and no one actually looks at it as a hospital, for the sick, actually that people have issues and they're actually wanting them to be addressed. Look at Baba Munashe. He has a genuine issue, and he believes that issue can be addressed. He has faith for that.
So finally, before you, what do you think is the legacy of this? I mean, your legacy. What do you want, like when one day, 50 years from now, and this is a Grammy Award-winning, or it's turned into an Oscar-winning play, a movie, an Emmy Award, whatever version of Zimbabwe we have?
I think it's what made this one interesting is actually exploring, aspects of faith, and I want to avoid using the word blind faith, but aspects of faith where you need a balance. I think bringing truth to faith is such an important thing. Is what's true and answering that question. So often when someone presents themselves, we just latch on with faith. But ask yourself, is what they're saying true? Is what they're doing true? Not only true to themselves as a person, but true to their community, to other people. Am I being true to you? And in cinema they call it cinema verite, or story truth. And so trying to capture or find the truth within the faith and faith within the truth. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sounds very philosophical.
I think for me it's being brave enough to tell the story.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to tell a story which shines into corners of darkness that our society has.
Yeah.
I think fundamentally we've become a society where we just don't talk about things in the open, and so we sort of pretend everything is fine. And some of the things we tackle are taboo. The abuse of power, sexual power in the church, the corruption, how they collude with people outside the church, the money, the trappings of power, the voices that are not given space to talk. So in the case of Tatenda not being believed because she's a woman, she's obviously wrong, because when somebody challenges somebody who's who's got power, it's because they essentially want something from somebody who's got power. So I think that's been a big one for me, like how do we make these characters tell stories that often, and it was key for me as well to sort of like make sure we kept the politicians out of it, because everything in Zimbabwe tends to gravitate towards being a politician and so forth. So I think the story itself, other than the internal aspects of the story, actually then says what other stories about our society are there to tell besides the stories of politicians.
Yes.
What else is the world? What else should the world know we're dealing with in Zimbabwe?
And there's so much narrative out there, so much story out there that we can, find and uncover and create the characters that can drive those stories. Very interesting.
In normal times we shake hands, but
COVID time.
Azvakaoma kugadzira dola kubva 15 cents. Azvakaoma trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents.